Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode and we will discuss on the new issue, Devops. That's why I like Professor David Smith very much because Professor David Smith actually bring many interesting idea analysis from different point of view. So I would request Professor David Smith regarding this DevOps. Why I choose this topic because as World Talent Economy Forum integrated more with research innovations and universities. So we are bringing new topic for our students. You know that December we have a big conference with Dhaka University. Ja- March next year we have another conference with Nikola Tesla Technology Conference. So hopefully through this process we can develop a knowledge-oriented society. Professor David Smith.
Dr. Sharif, thank you so much for this. The concept of DevOps actually goes back quite a while as you go back and look at, and the basis of it actually goes back about 100 years to where how the automobile industry was revolutionized by the first moving assembly line. And, what that did is it brought in, into in the industry, the technology, the automation, and the operations together to dramatically reduce the time required to produce an automobile. And that same basic mindset is what DevOps does. And what has happened is companies have adopted a DevOps principle are innovating faster and leaving competition behind. So let's step back and say, what is DevOps? And DevOps has many different flavors. There's a different flavor of DevOps if you are using a waterfall method for software development, using an agile method, whether you're developing in an embedded data centers where you're doing it in the cloud, or whether you're like what we talked about yesterday, we're doing the development at the edge of cloud. So DevOps is a software development model that brings development and operations to the same table at the same time to facilitate very efficient, very productive, and secure software production and delivery. You notice it's not just software development, it's the software development, production, and delivery. And today, with the times where we are having shorter and shorter times to get software to the market, and in software, there's a new concept over the last really 8, 9 years called continuous software releases, where you're constantly updating software as it's out being deployed. DevOps is even more important than ever before. And what DevOps facilitates is a collaboration between the development teams, the product teams, the operation teams to really be innovative, to brainstorm, and to deliberate on how to develop and deliver software products that meet the widest range of needs across the various hardware sets and software sets. And you also have very maximum efficiency that way. So what the DevOps model does is it ensures that the best teams, technology, and processes needed to accelerate, automate, test, secure, put quality in it, are working together throughout the software development life cycle. And you heard there's multiple parts in there. In the old waterfall method, you decide what you want in a product, you wrote the requirements, you pass that over to developers, they wrote the stuff, then you pass that over to a QA team, they beat it up and broke it, sent it back to developers, it went back to QA, and only then did you think about how am I going to deploy this out into the real world? How am I going to sell it? How am I going to put it and sell this software as a service? Am I going to sell it as a download that people run on their own machines and worry about? But that whole process of getting from there to that point has become under the concept that we call DevOps. And while there's a clear understanding of what the DevOps ethos is there, separate IT teams, such as a product, such as development, such as quality assurance, IT operation, security, the project management office, and others all have to come together under the DevOps umbrella. And actually, as you reach the end part of the DevOps development, usually customer support comes under at least a part of that umbrella. And it's used to really develop and deliver more reliable software that meets, very important today, the compliance and the security requirements uh, that are necessary, that it meets the customer requirements, and that by following a development process such as some of the agile frameworks, such as deliberate agile, which is my favorite agile, and the DevOps constraints and the security frameworks and things, you are releasing products that can achieve business goals. And the main goal of DevOps is to do away with any bottlenecks or silos that result from moving software development processes from one team to the other. You've heard us talk many times on your show, Sharif, about how we're in a time of using group intelligence, and how we're in a time where we use teams with the right competencies and capabilities wherever they are located. While things like a good, robust DevOps program allows you to utilize that group intelligence and allows you to develop wherever it makes sense to develop it there. So if I, again, pull myself back up and look at the top of DevOps going down, there's some guiding principles that you've got to do. And some of these really goes, like I was just talking about, the team collaboration and communication. Uh, the goal of DevOps is really to put all those people we talked before, the development team, security, operation, quality, testers, product managers, program management, and even customer support, into a culture that will result in delivering a better product at an enhanced delivery rate that will meet and most likely exceed the needs of your customers. So that's part of the framework for it. Another part of what is very good with DevOps is one of its underlying goals is to automate as much of the process as you can. So let me give you a personal example. In my company, when we have a very advanced DevOps operation, and we've automated a bunch of testing. So whenever any of my developers check out code to work on from our repositories, and they work on it, when they try to save it back into the repository, we have automated tests run against that software as part of our DevOps operation. And if there are errors in that code, our automation will not allow the developer to check the code back into the repository until those errors are fixed. And what does that do? It produces much higher quality software. It prevents from other people from working on the same software code with errors in it. And it really helps you streamline the process to get there. And it makes your testing as you begin to release in the product state goes so much better, because with the automated testing, when you commit the code back, that dramatically reduces errors down the road and dramatically speeds up the time to get through the process. You also, under DevOps, have what I mentioned earlier, is a concept called CI/CD, which is continuous integration and continuous delivery. Continuous integration ensures that the DevOps teams are continuously merging code changes into the code repositories to improve software performance. That's what I just talked about, where during that stage we do an automated test whenever the developers check their codes back into the code repository. While continuous delivery facilitates the process of automating your software releases process as you get up closer and closer to production. Oftentimes, as you develop code, you run forks into the code development process where it goes up and it will come down. And the continuous integration delivery makes those forks possible, where you can still keep them in the same area, but have enhancements from one fork or the main path be applied to the others. And really, it's all about meeting users' experience, compliance, and business demands. Um, and so DevOps has to balance business, compliance, development operations, user experience goals. And they have to do that in a way that makes sense for the company and for how they're doing that. So that's a pretty high, quick definition. I can go much deeper as we get into the life cycle and other parts like that. But Sharif, any questions before I jump further into that?
Yes, like we need more industrial explanation example for our students because most of the cases we are engaging with the youth of South Asia,
Right.
and for them this is new and important.
Yeah, it should be pretty important to them as you look at what we can do with it and how it can be applied. Let me do this real quick. Hang on one second. Um, so I am going to actually bring up a slide with me to help explain part of it as we go through it. Let me take that out and work as quickly as I can to get this up. So as I talked about, the DevOps model life cycle is one that's very important to use and work with. And you've heard me talking about things like continuous development, continuous integration, continuous testing, continuous monitoring. Those are all elements that are necessary in it. But what happens then is you have to then develop a culture that supports that. So this is a view of beginning to look at what we talked about, where you see the development, the security, the operations, and the quality assurance built around DevOps. And you can see, though, that the IT service management, which includes how you're deploying it, the tools and other pieces, the hardware, the culture, and the practices are very important there because they will vary a lot from industry to industry, product type to other product types, and Sharif, even country to country as you begin to look at this. And most of it works in an agile environment, increasingly today in an agile cloud environment, but even moving further in the future to an agile edge of cloud environment as well. So all of those elements in the middle are what makes up DevOps and how they intersect with each of them. The other thing you see is this is the DevOps life cycle. And you can see it actually is a complete circle where you plan what you're going to do with the software, you develop it, you deliver it, and you operate it. But you can see there that, as we spoke about earlier, the collaboration is very, very important. The workflow, particularly as you look at the automations on the workflow, is important. Security, compliance, and the continuous improvement. And that goes back into, so let me just step back and go once more time. So continuous development is really the first phase of the life cycle. And that's where the teams come together. They draw a roadmap on how they can meet the goals of the project. And everything at this point comes down to designing what should be included and what should be excluded and putting the plans in place of it. Then you start the development process and you begin to have continuous integration. And this is where developers are starting to contribute their code into the repositories that are automated at this point and beginning it. So you will see code commits to the repositories that could be either daily, uh, several days, weekly, or even longer, depending on the length of the sprint that the organization has chose to use. Many organizations use uh, a 3-day, 5-day sprint. Some use a 10-day sprint to begin to write the code to meet those needs and then assess it going forward. And DevOps and the PMO are part of what's managing that process going farther. Each block of code is merged into the repository. That's where the automated test I talked about earlier happens. It's also expected at this time that you have some form of human code review So developers looking at other developers' code. And you have something called unit test and integration. And so this unit testing is going beyond the simple automated test I talked about, but it's using automated tools to, instead of looking just at what the one developer put in, it will look at the goals for that sprint and begin to test all the different elements of code that have been committed for that sprint and begin to do it. At this phase, the team will begin to look more about how does it work in the form of the product itself and not just the modules, which are the unit tests. Uh, and they begin to look for software bugs, code defects, problems with the hardware, software in deployment model are being used. And so they can do that. There's a lot of tools out there that can do this. We used a variety of them, but there's a ton of tools, some that you pay for, some that are open source to help make this uh, going. Another real important part of DevOps, and this is probably where DevOps really got the genesis for happening, is you have continuous monitoring. And it's used to help you look at how it works, how the code works. My DevOps engineers spend time monitoring not just the code itself, but how it works in the hardware software environment it's being developed for. And this at this stage, such issues such as memory usage, which software developers almost never worry about, latency, server response, uh, the size of the code, the licensing you use with the code, all of those types of monitoring come back in place here. It is very important, particularly, Sharif, for your developers in developing nations. Software is written today using a bunch of libraries, or called DLLs. Some of these are open source that are free to use. Some cost money. Some are open source with a lot of restrictions in them. For example, one of the open source libraries that my development teams want to use is some from Stanford University. And Stanford has a lot of open source libraries, but a few of those libraries have clauses in it. So in one of the libraries that my team loved to do, and we were writing software for the healthcare industry, has a clause in it that says uh, these libraries are not free to use if the industry does animal testing. Guess what? The medical industry does animal testing. So that one library from Stanford that we could use in almost any other industry for free, we couldn't use in healthcare. So that's a very important part of this continuous monitoring process. And that's some of the goals that you put in place when you do your roadmap to kick off DevOps there. You do continuous feedback. So part of what we do with our teams in this is we have stand-up calls every day. And most of them are very short, but that's where you get the continuous feedback for continuous improvement. And and then we have code reviews at least once a week where we give more detailed continuous feedback. And again, the developers are expected to start deploying their code to the production service servers and our testing servers and things. So this is part of what's called continuous deployment. Is you go through and you test and you update, and you feel confident, you go ahead and do the updates to the production servers. And then you have continuous operations. And that kind of helps in what you see here. In this chart that is still up on the screen, this is ideal of seeing that this is a continuous process of DevOps built around the application that's in the middle. And that to me is another piece of DevOps development that can be done there. And Sharif, I know I'm talking a lot, but this is the process really is pretty much the same for many people. Last thing before I go back and let you help me understand other questions we might need to answer, is there's some metrics for this. You want to know is your time in your sprint and how many lines of code you can get out in that. What are the production failure rates? What's the mean time to recover from the errors you see during the DevOps process? What's the deployment speed? What's the deployment frequency? What's the median time to production? What's the average lead time? All of those metrics are necessary as you try to optimize your development process, your operation process, and really help you understand the business needs. And as you do this, it really helps you look at quality, speed, and execution. So, Sharif, that's a little bit more. Other questions I can try to answer?
Excellent, Professor. I am really enjoying your session because this kind of session really helpful because you are going for detail. It's look like more class, and we have youth engagement with Asia Pacific student and the youth communities. So you are actually bringing very interesting points. Beside that, like even I just want to share today when I read the newspaper that time I saw that Bangladesh Prime Minister she is also motivating youth communities and the industrialists to do more research work because research give them more innovations and more particulars, new solution for the society. So, what do you think? This kind of DevOps and the software related things, how our industry can adapt? They are not adapting these kind of things specifically in South Asia, and how they can get more industrial benefit through this process.
The DevOps process is one of the current best practices, and it works across many different parts of the ethos of software development, which is software is in almost every product today. So you see that as part of necessary to compete uh, to develop products and services today. And investing in research in this area is an excellent way to do it because you see though that it's not just the technical training, but it's others. So if you look at DevOps, um, and you're now pushing me back into my mind more of my academic hat, is that there's something called a DevOps Trinity. And it's really what it takes about gaining alignment between the software development life cycles. And these really come in, and you've heard this phrase so many times in so many different industries. It's the people, the process, and the tools. So in DevOps, you have to look at the people and the culture. And so upstream in it, the DevOps culture is to move fast and innovate. And but the downstream part of that is how do you move fast and you innovate rapidly, but how do you maintain quality? How do you maintain stability? How do you maintain optimal performance, for example, with how the applications are using memory? How you can do compliance and what's your uptime? The processes and practices are a little bit more different because we can use different types on it. So on the upstream side, Kanban, Scrums, Agile, different flavors of Agile. These are all part of the processes and practices that you use in DevOps. But if I go downstream side on it, you are looking things like waterfall processes. You're looking at other type of project management tools. You're looking at other type of uh, very rigorous linear development tools that do not move as fast, but are sometimes necessary. So in healthcare and in security products that we develop, in financial products, we use a form of Agile called DADS, Deliberate Agile Development. And unlike pure Agile, where you have a voice of the customer, the DADS Agile approach, the Deliberate Agile approach we use, has more feedback from the customers. It has feedback from compliance. So, for example, in healthcare, you have to be HIPAA compliant, you have to be PCI compliant, you have to be high trust compliant, you have to be compliant with the uh, government's requirements for where the data lives. You have to be compliant with all the Food and Drug Administration rules for devices and others like that. So as you're doing that, you have to be more deliberate in that process than in a traditional one. And that's where the processes and practices coming in. But down to tools and technologies, there's so many different types of tools and technologies to use. Um, there's websites everywhere that you can Google, and it will bring up what are the best development tools, what are the best DevOps tools that are there. And for example, when I look at what we do from a list that I actually just Googled and brought up, we use 5 or 6 of them as we go through. We use one of them called Jenkins as part of our continuous delivery. We use other ones in there for test. We use other ones like Puppet as we look at some of our unit areas. Uh, there's just so many different ones that you can use. We use Git, and Git is part of what we do for the version control of the different uh, flavors of our software, and sometimes even the different markets, because I can take a common core development and use Git and do a different version coming out for running on your own servers, running on a Microsoft cloud, an Amazon cloud, a Google cloud, or running at the edge of cloud. And Git will let us keep the same base code, but do the modifications and the versions control that are necessary to meet each of those needs or different customers' needs. So there's a lot of variations that can be done there. But all of those three trinities of the people, the process, and the tools and technology, they go across that whole life cycle we talked about, from the define, plan, code, build, integrate, test, release, deploy, operate. And that's the continuous life cycle that you have up on the screen today. And these are really, really necessary as you get down there and you begin to see it. And particularly down in our processes and practices, these are going to be very different with the culture of the companies, the culture of the government, the culture of the universities where you're being taught, the boot camps where you're being taught, and even the tool selections will be different there. And there's a lot of movement now to adopt a very robust DevOps posture in most companies. And what is really good about that is it's creating tremendous job opportunities. So, Sharif, in Bangladesh, in Malaysia, in that part of the world, one of the great things for your students to learn is to go ahead and take most of this time in boot camps or separate academies, how to function as a DevOps. You want to have a little bit of development background in there, but the ability to learn how to do a DevOps, which takes you through the entire life cycle, gives you a very great position, and a good position if you want to move up in management, if you want to be an entrepreneur and start your own company. The skills you would learn being a DevOps are excellent ones to apply for that. And you've heard me mention there's just a wide variety of tools, and you're always needing new tools. The area of DevOps for edge of cloud deployment, the area of DevOps for Internet of Things, and for particularly Internet of Things clusters and micronets of Internet of Things, there are not many people who understand that yet. So it's also an area for research in universities and colleges in that area. And people who can become DevOps that can go across that whole ecosystem, they're going to be some of the highest paid employees within most development organizations. So that kind of helps us get there. Um, who are some of the leaders in DevOps today? It's going to surprise you, and it shouldn't surprise you. I mean, you've got the big ones like the IBMs, the NTT Data Systems, and others like that are the leaders there. Amazon, uh, Amazon, which is the leader in the public cloud infrastructure, they have new releases going to the Amazon cloud. You're going to like this one. They average a new release every second from products that are on the Amazon cloud. that could only be done with a DevOps type of architecture and approach. Ticketmaster, uh, they're one of the top 10 e-commerce sites, and they deploy to production at the end of every sprint, at least, but they deploy also sometimes multiple times during a sprint. Netflix, Nordstrom, Allstate, Coca-Cola. I mean, the list goes on and on of companies that have really embraced this DevOps architecture to develop products. You're seeing it now move into many of the large integration companies. You're seeing it move into large consultancies like Pricewaterhouse, EY, and others, adapting this DevOps culture and this DevOps approach. And you're seeing it really move beyond where it is. And this technology is really well posed to make edge compliant DevOps the new standard and norm, where you almost cannot deploy to edge compliant systems without some type of DevOps in it, because you're trying to look not only between the business functions, the development functions, the technology functions. You now have to see a set of requirements that spans your infrastructure, because edge of cloud is outside of your organization, and as the name says, it's at the edge of cloud. And you're seeing, for example, security that spans infrastructure, network data processes, workflows, internet intellectual property, as well as the security that is built into the applications itself. And with more and more devices that are in place than ever before, we really need to look at processes that make sure that nothing bad happens to these assets. And DevOps helps to do that. And it also lets you attain a higher level of automation to reduce errors that are caused by manual processes and manual Q&A and manual deployment. Uh, and that is all part of the process there. Last point on this one, and I see that Mark's here and he can jump on part of this, is the deployment of DevOps can be very different. We were deploying several years ago one of my products inside a very, very large healthcare group. And the CIO had a team of engineers there to look over our shoulder. What we did is we have automated DevOps. We brought the package of code in and other requirements. We loaded it onto one server. Then we executed one DevOps command on the console. And the product went and built all the servers, built all the virtual machines, set up all the security. It actually built over 20 virtual servers in the process from that one command. Those traditional engineers, they were upset with us because they didn't see us entering line after line after line of code to execute all that. And the CIO called me and I went and told her, look, this gives you more security. This reduces your errors. Look at how fast this went compared to what those guys wanted us to do. And she went, David, this is the future. And they don't get it yet. So that is part of the whole DevOps process, Sharif. And Mark, welcome to the broadcast.
Glad to be here. What's the conversation on today and all of that? Because y'all are always having fascinating conversations and all along those lines. And of course, we've got people watching from Brazil and from the United States and various other places. So always glad to be part of the various conversations. And it looks like today we're talking about workflows, and workflows are very much
well,
an important
we're talking
part
about DevOps.
What'd you say, David?
We're really talking about DevOps.
Okay.
And this is kind of where DevOps lives in that workflow.
Gotcha. So we're talking about age of the cloud and all of that. So we got the cloud system going. Sometimes when people talk the cloud and all of this technological stuff and all of that, and we all hear about the cloud and the culture of the cloud and all along those lines. And I do know that sometimes for lack of a better term, David, the common citizen is kind of like the early invention of the internet and the laptop. Their eyes get a little glazed over because they heard all these terms that folks like yourself that are in the space know and are very appreciative of and all of that. And then the rest of the world goes like, I'll wait till it gets to the more civilian level and all in that space until I start making comments on it and in that world. But what do you say to folks that are like, I guess, not jumping on the bandwagon and learning this kind of knowledge? Because I know this knowledge is very important, but then you got like the common citizen. It's not just the old jargon, but it's also the person that might be 30 or 40 and they're sitting there going like, I'll leave this to the technicians because this is beyond my scope of understanding, and I'll wait till it's something that I need to know. It's like a lot of us have lights and we have electricity and we have all of these other amenities that we have in our world, and we don't really always know how they operate, even our air conditioning. And then when they break down, then we are kind of lost, because that's why we got to call the repairman or somebody to help fix it that knows what they're doing in that space, unless you try to do it yourself. And as some people know from plumbing disasters, that can be a disaster and all of that. So I guess what I'm asking you, David, is should we be as just common citizens learning more about these kind of things? And if so, how would we get this knowledge on a more layman kind of thought pattern and all of that? Because I do know that these things are very important. And a lot of people, even though they got laptops and computers, have no clue how they work. But I was just wondering your thoughts as to, do we just take the benefits of them and try to work that into whatever our business and entrepreneurial ideas are? Or do we need to learn more of this inner workings so that we can actually be able to guide in there and not have to call a computer technician or a computer person that knows the layout of the lands as the way that most of us will call a plumber or an air conditioner or repairman?
Well, Mark, good question. And let me tell you, even with what you do with Pod TV,
Right.
you implement some of the elements of what a DevOps culture and a DevOps environment can be. And you're doing that simply because it's the best way to bring new things out to the market. I mean,
Right.
you have a planning process, a development process, an integration process, an operation process, and a learning process.
Right.
And that's part of the continuous loop here. And in the middle of it, you have to put testing, security, and compliance. I mean, I know as you begin to deploy things through Pod TV, you've got to make sure they're secure, that
Right.
they work, that you don't break laws, that
Exactly.
you have the other elements in that. Well, when you're writing software, when you're developing applications, you have the same thing. So what DevOps is it's taking this model into development process. Think about this, Dr. Sharif and Mark. Name me a product that costs more than $100, takes power, and doesn't have software in it.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, whether it's your
There's not
phone, whether
many.
it's your microwave, they all got software.
Well, that's software in it. All of those have software in it. So the software development process is one that's very important to almost any industry and almost any product today. I mean, I don't use a lot of software when I manufacture a hammer, but a
Right.
hammer doesn't take power.
Right.
But most things that take power, you have software in them.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the current state of the art of how you manage the development and operations of products that are built upon software, and the software development process and the software ideation process.
Yeah, and I guess that even comes down to the security, because you just alluded to an aspect of
And how
software.
you do it.
Yeah, because even like the
Makes sense,
microwave, I
Mark?
imagine that a hacker could use the microwave, because you're right, microwaves also have a lot of times computer and electronic software. So I guess a good hacker, and I don't know what they would use it for, could hack into even your microwave if they wanted to hack into the microwave, based on the fact that microwaves do have computer technology. Of course, we know a lot of people depend on their Alexa to get their lights on and different other things. And let's just say that a good hacker wanted to disrupt things in a place like the White House or something like that. I would think that they could probably even use something like Alexa or the microwave to get in there. That might be a little science fiction-y, but I'm still thinking that they could pull it off if
Mark,
they had the
it's
wherewithal.
not hard to hack those. I have a set of tools that if your network parameter isn't strong, yes, I could hack your Alexis probably in less than half an hour.
Wow, that sounds incredible. And you could hack into. I mean, I don't know why anybody would want to, but just about everybody, in particular in the Western world, has a microwave because we like quick cooking and we like things that could go on. Why would anybody hack into a microwave? And could you hack into a microwave? Because microwaves also have electronic devices and communication
They
devices, as
do.
you just alluded to.
But most microwaves are not connected to the network anywhere.
That's true.
The new ones, you're beginning to see that as part of your integrated household. But see
Right.
what's happening on this, and Sharif, I think this is very important for your students that you have there and for your government listeners, is in DevOps is a whole set of tools that are required to manage this DevOps process. These include some traditional tools like project management tools. Luckily, there's many project management tools that are optimized for software development. And this is like the lean production, the Scrum, the Kanbans, the others there. And one of my favorite tools I use there is GitHub, and I use Jira as part of what we use internally. But then you go to collaborative source repositories. Again, a lot of different ones, and many clouds have their own flavor of the variations of these. But then you go into the continuous integration, continuous deployment pipelines. And once again, there's a lot of tools there. There's some open source ones that are very, very good. You have some tools that, like SpinMaker, which straddle application infrastructure. You have another one called Agile, Argo CD. You have Kubernetes. You have different federation tools built at that level. Then you go into test automation tools and the test automation frameworks. And boy, there's a lot of the ones in there to do it. But these are very, very important as you go forward. And there's just such a wide range of open source, a wide range of commercial ones as well. So you have that. So you go from CI, continuous integration, continuous development, to test automation, to configuration management. In configuration management, depending on the clouds, depending on what you do, have very different ones. So there's tons of different types of configuration management tools. Then you have monitoring tools and you have continuous feedback tools. And these are the tools that you need to use to kind of develop and manage and deploy this type of development process. But Dr. Sharif, the same type of approach with using these tools can help you manage almost any business you're running. It can help you manage almost any large project, even though it might not be a software development project, by using some of these tools and adapting others to do the same functions. Because if you think about what we've been describing today, we have been describing really a process that is used to produce optimum software code that can be used throughout the entire ecosystem, and how it works with the ethos of the company and of the team you're using. So it works, like I said, it is the state of the art for software development, but it also can be used in many other areas and ways to do that as well. Um, and it's a tool that really the time has come to use it that way. So, Sharif, thoughts, other areas you'd like to see me cover? You're muted.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Excellent presentation, Professor. Especially this kind of presentations and contribution really, really helpful for us because, now I am in Dhaka. It's a different cities, it's a different cultures, completely different. But we have many talented. We are engaging with these talented and we are bringing new uh, concept, new things. Many universities and corporations and agencies, they are welcoming us. But definitely this kind of contribution, because I'm really, really proud for Professor David Smith, because when I send the invitations, actually many speakers, they say that this is new thing, new concept, maybe it's difficult for our students, but Professor David Smith is always helpful for World Talent Economy Forum. And trust me, I attend in different Ivy League university, different top university. This is one of the top class, best class in my life. I learned a lot. I'm really, really impressed by your session. Mr. Markley, I think
Yes.
definitely you have new questions for our Professor David Smith.
No, like I said, I was learning about all of this, and definitely I agree that yes, systems are very important, as David was saying, and yes, we do even have a system here in the Pod TV land. Even though sometimes we use antiquated systems, because I use an Excel to make sure that we are going 24/7 and all of that. Because sometimes after the shows air, including your shows, Sharif, we will sometimes re-air them again later on and all of that, particularly those that I have access to. So we got to work on that, Sharif, so that I can actually re-air the show at another hour and all along those lines. But definitely we try to keep the shows flowing and all of that. I can actually use the YouTube now that I thought about it, that so we can find a way that we can re-air even some of these. See, I just did systems real quick because I just remember that I can do a YouTube conversion, and we can actually even use this show and yesterday's show and re-air it, say at midnight tonight and all of that. So we can definitely have that flow going on. It says there was a time that they wanted to get that whole 24/7, and I'm going like, David, I'm just one person, and I'm one person that maybe has a little bit of help here and there, but not tons of help and all of that. How can we do this? And then I was like, hey, reruns and the public domain. So we can get other shows from other networks that are in the public domains, and therefore we can make it go 24/7. So you'll be getting an episode later on this evening, David, if you watch Pod TV, of Wild Wild West. Yes, I'm bringing back the Wild Wild West. We've already brought back the Beverly Hillbillies and Whose Line Is It Anyway? And yes, I'm talking about the Groucho Marx version, because that would be in the public domain. And all of
Well,
that.
Mark, one of my cars looks just like the Beverly Hillbillies truck. So, we can go and work with that too. But what's interesting to me, Mark, is the process you just described is one where DevOps tools, particularly ones developed for the broadcast industry and the production industry, could so well be applied to meet your needs. And instead of you having pieces that are just parts, you'll be able to put these parts together into a system and let the system work. I mean, your compliance on, particularly with you pulling in the old programs and things, and with the new ones, your compliance has gone up orders of magnitude. With you having to report, you're having to give numbers, you're having to look at regions it's being broadcast into and where the viewers are. And all of those could be part of a development ops like process that could be applied at Pod TV. And Dr. Sharif, you can see the power of the topic you've chosen today is if I can take it from software development and move it to running a broadcast operation with some of the same type of tools, some of the same type of steps, that whole process flow of between development, operations, compliance, and deployment, you can see the power at any of the folks within any of the regions which we're broadcasting today.
Not only that, but
As
David,
Mark said, from Brazil to Bangladesh to EU to wherever, these tools are all applicable everywhere there.
no,
So
and
go ahead,
David, I
Mike.
would
Sorry.
imagine David, I would imagine it also can play into, a lot of times, whether it's the Pod TV network or whether it's just, I have a friend that has a network called Nine on the Ground, or whether it's just folks that are doing their own Facebook Lives and aren't part of a network. A lot of times they get frustrated by the various social media algorithms. And I imagine a program like what you're talking about can help them not so much skirt around, but at least know what the dangers are of the various algorithms, whether that's a Facebook algorithm, a YouTube algorithm, or a number of other algorithms that will look at the content. And like I said, those shows I was talking about are in the public domain, but they would make sure that we are literally in the public domain. And they would also make sure that, like their music, that it is protected music. And the way that what you're describing, there are programs that can be put in place that can administer that to make sure that there are less times that you get dinged, for lack of a better term, and everything, because you are breaking the other social media or social outlets algorithm. And we know that they all have different algorithms, because none of the algorithms are consistent. Like Facebook's algorithm will be totally different from YouTube's algorithm, which will be totally different from LinkedIn's algorithm.
And Mark, that's where you develop those automated tests for each of those.
Right.
So when you begin to run the process or you write the code, or in this instance, you look at the XML tags and other stuff you're generating
Right.
that those algorithms run against. This allows you to optimize them as you're in the development process for the environments you're deploying into. So in the software, if I was deploying in a standalone server, if I'm deploying on your machines there, if I'm deploying in the Microsoft cloud, the Amazon cloud, the Google cloud, the IBM cloud, you can optimize your tools and your tool set and your automated testing and your automated compliance for each of those different environments, which is like you can do there as well. If you are broadcasting, for example, into China, you have a 90% different compliance that you have to do to broadcast there. If I am going into Venezuela and South America, different compliance sets, different standards. If I'm going into some other areas, you can't use the same streaming tools you do. For example, Mark, you cannot stream directly into UAE based off of a streaming server in the United States. You have to go over to UAE and restream off of a server there. Well, that's a different thread, that's a different environment. And that's where DevOps tools like this can take advantage of those. Does that answer your question a little bit more? You see, you're seeing my television background, my old past as well. And you're muted. And since I'm not the host, I can't unmute you. And Sharif's not here to do it. So let me try it this way.
Yes, I'm multitasking. I oftentimes am multitasking and all of that. So definitely, I was hearing what you're saying, and definitely we'll have to look at a way to get in place. And all of that. That way.
Yeah. I mean, either Sharif or you, wherever you're, is having internet problems because it's even affected in the broadcast coming to my end. So welcome back, Sharif. We just went through a explanation of how Mark could actually use this to solve his problems of compliance in places like
Yeah.
China and South America and others.
Thank you. What is your concluding remarks for Professor David Smith and Mr. Markey? Professor David Smith.
Well, Sharif, I thank you for letting me give a lecture today.
Yeah.
And this has been fun, a little bit harder than I expected earlier this morning. But now DevOps is so important to the industry, and it works the same type of approaches anywhere in the world and in any country. There will be nuances going back to the culture. We talked about how culture is important and how you have to create a DevOps culture. And you really do, and how people, culture, process, practices, and tools and technologies come into play. So it's important for your listeners to begin to think through this, think about how to use it. I can tell you one of the greatest improvements to our development speed and the quality of our developments and our time to market has been through the automation tools that DevOps has allowed us to use. It's like I said, we use it even every time a developer checks code out and checks code in. And that helps us ensure the quality and speed and low error rates that we need to be successful. So I would encourage your viewers, Sharif, to take the time to understand this deeper. There's a lot of resources out there. You can get into DevOps using mostly open source tools, so the cost is low. But I would, particularly in developing nations, look at establishing boot camps and academies that can teach DevOps as part of the software development process. And I can tell you their DevOps graduates will be the highest in demand of all their students who graduate. So Sharif, thank you so much for this today.
Professor David Smith, excellent sessions. And definitely we have a very, very, very big conference in Dhaka University. Stock Exchange Commission chairmen, central bank chairmen, and the largest corporations, policy makers, they are actually joining in our conference. I want to invite you in our conference as a speaker. Besides that, Next year, March, we have Nikola Tesla Technology Conference. 25,000 scientists around the world we are inviting, and BBC also supporting our projects. Uh, we need people like you who can contribute, who can create the new knowledge, who can give us the new opportunity for the youth communities. And you know that Asia Pacific has huge amount of population, even though only in Bangladesh, 80% people, more than 80 million people actually youth. So your contribution actually help to grow our economy. It helps to grow our youth communities, and hopefully we can do more interesting project for Asia Pacific, especially for South Asia. And by this process, hopefully you will be part of the history. And I request all of our audience, please share our content with your government agency, with corporation, and with academy. World Talent Economy Forum in South Asia, we engage with millions of people, and I'm happy that many cities, city mayors, city chief, they are actually collaborating with World Talent Economy Forum. We will start our roadshow. We will develop more of our lab, and through the contributions of developed world, we can develop new generation. We can develop new knowledge-oriented society, which is very, very important. Thank you, Professor David Smith. This is one of your best session for World Talent Economy Forum. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.